Hey guys, it's Cody. Day 66 of doing the Odin project. I'm going to break down the time that I spent today, talk about the project that I worked on today, and go into the details of what my activities were. So overall, I spent approximately 7 hours on the Odin project today. Most of that was coding. A good portion of that at the start of the day was reading. At the very, very end of the day, after coding was done, I spent a decent chunk on documentation. I did do a knowledge check today because of the section that I completed, and there was some typing at the beginning of the day, as usual. So the reading was focused on understanding functional components within React and specifically learning them after learning class components. So from class components, I learned about state and properties and how to use them and how they can be pretty powerful in that anytime there's an update of the data that generated the HTML or the JSX within React, the React would then re-render that accordingly so that those data changes would reflect in the HTML and would update on the client end. And so got to learn a little bit about how function components have developed over time, how they went from being stateless to actually having a way to access a state within a function and to access or simulate similar lifecycle methods that class components have access to. And with that, the assignment after reading on the functional components and getting a bit of a conceptual understanding, the assignment was to go back to the CV React app and refactor the class components to functional components. And so I did that. I thought it was straightforward to start out with. I was going to start from a bottom-up perspective, so go to my lowest level component in my app and then work my way back up each component that component was a part of. But that ended up breaking the app right away and made it hard to actually see if what I was doing was right, because those lower class components, at least the one that I chose, was being utilized in a lot of different other components. And so it caused couple different problems when I did actually make a change to it. So I decided to flip it and go top down for the second attempt at changing over the components from class to functional. So I started at the top of my app at the cv.js section. So that's the very top, right below index.js. I have it actually right here. We can see the changes that I made. So it was fairly simple, just getting rid of the class declaration up here and the constructor and the render function, and just doing declaring a function with an arrow function and having the return statement down here. So you can see what I deleted. So that made it really easy, really straightforward, because it was just one single thing that I was getting that I was updating with the functional components. I did then step down each level to actually do this, but this was the original level that I tried to actually edit at the very beginning. So this is the editable text.js, and there's just a lot going on with this. State is used a lot with this CV level of the app. There's no state, so it's pretty straightforward transition from class component to function component. But once I got into state within the editable text, then it definitely got a lot more complicated. If we look at this, so the main things that I did, so I was trying to transfer the state over to the functional equivalent for the component. So what I ended up doing, instead of having properties, I have this deconstructor up here that passes to the function an element and a text class, and those will be used later on. So to set up the state, I had to set up two variables or two sets of variables. One was edit mode and set edit mode using the useState React component. So I set up the edit mode, set edit mode, and the set text, or text and set text states using the useState React API. And so with the edit mode, for each editable text, it'll automatically be set to false, and for the text, it'll add the text class. So that's that text class that we had up here. Then those two things will be used down in the actual rendering, or in the area where the JSX is returned. So if we go down here, it starts off, if the edit mode is true, then we should send back inputs, and for everything else we should send back just regular HTML elements that are not inputs. And so that's what the default will come down to, and then it'll use that edit class to actually say what the class is, and then use that for the default kind of placeholder text for each one of the elements. And so let's go back up here. And then the functions, instead of using binding to the state, all I had to do was really change these into functions, using the arrow functions to change these up a bit, and to remove anything where it was referring to dot set state, or like anything that had this dot in it, then I had to remove that. So the good example is this dot set state for changing the text of an HTML element on change. So originally within the class component, you had to use this dot set state, set the text to what we wanted it to. So this was just doing it for the default value, or if a user did actually enter something new, then it would set it to what the event target value was, which is the user's input. And we have that same thing over here, but instead of using this dot set state, we're using the set.text function that was declared up here within the using the useState method from React for the functional component. And that was true for a lot of this stuff. It was mainly just getting rid of the this dot equivalents for everything. So these were all functions that were defined with this dot, the function bind this, and now you can just call those directly instead of referring to this. It is actually pretty straightforward, but it's a lot to do all at once without breaking it immediately and not knowing what you're doing. So doing the top-down approach was pretty helpful for actually doing things more from the simplest thing to the most complex thing. And so the functionality of that's the same, so I'm not going to show you guys that, but I did want to just show you what this code looked like after I edited it. The other thing that I worked on today was the memory card game project. This was another React app that I was making, and specifically to practice functional components. And we could see here the instructions for what to do for this application. So this is making a game where you present the user with several cards that have an image or some text or both on them, and the images are all displayed at the same time right next to each other, and the user is to click one of them to start out with, and then once they click it, it'll reshuffle the presentation of those images, and then the user has to click a different picture without clicking the one that they already clicked before. And then the next round, they'll have to click the other pictures that are not the two other pictures that they already clicked before, and it'll keep on going from there. And so that's like the base of the game. But the instructions were to keep score, so keep the current score, keep the user's best score. So once they accidentally click a image that they already clicked, it'll reset the game, set the current score back to 0, and then if the previous current score was higher than the best score, which is initially set to 0, then that'll become the best score, and then they have to start over and see if they can beat that best score again. And so those were some of the main things. Was the current score, the best score is specifications that they asked for within the assignment, and to being able to display the cards, and also displaying the cards in a random order when the user clicks on one. So that's kind of the base specifications for what this app needs to do. And let me show you what I ended up getting to. So I kept it very simple along the whole entire path. So I kept it simple from the beginning, just trying to get it running and not necessarily worrying about styling. And still, I don't really have a lot of styling here. And just trying to get those base kind of components set up within the app. But we can take a look at this code. So this is just the app, and I did just keep it all in one main JS file essentially. And so I start out by defining this. I really started out by defining these states for the current score, the best score, and then emojis. I wanted to use emojis because I didn't want to necessarily deal with images for this. I wanted to keep it really simple. So I found an API up here to generate random emojis using a single function. But yeah, so I defined these states, and then I defined a way to generate a specific amount of emojis by using this get n random emojis function that I define up here. And that uses this get emoji function from this API that I use for this project. And so this get n random emojis will give you n number of emojis, so it has an input of n, and then it builds an array of emojis of that length n, and then it returns that emoji array. So then the initial state will be set for the emojis array to an array of 2 random emojis, as we can see here. And then all the scores are set to 0 because the user hasn't scored anything yet. And then let's go down to what's returned at first. So the first thing that's returned is the app. There's a header section. I just had that because that was the default thing that was in there and I didn't change it. And then I made an H1 just to have this emoji games come up, and then the current score, which was set to 0, it's coming up here, and then the best score using that best score state, and then I have the emojis going to an unordered list. And within that unordered list, the emojis array is mapped over, and a list item is returned for each emoji with the key, with the ID of the emoji, the ID set for the emoji, and an on-click event, and the actual emoji given to that. So let's go back up and look at the get n random emojis function real quick, because this is where the emoji array is really defined. So we have that ID that we use for the key and the ID, the emoji, which is the actual emoji that's generated from the API, and then we set the initial click status of the emoji to false, since none of them will be clicked when they're initially generated. But it does have that click function down here, and so the emojis will be generated, as we can see with this example over here. So we have 2 emojis generated since it's the beginning of the game, and then we have a single on-click function that has a bit of logic in it to understand where the player is at within the game, within the round, and if they have already clicked that emoji, then what they should do. So on the click, I find the clicked emoji by going over the emoji items and using .find to get the emoji with an ID that's equivalent to the one that was clicked. And then that's what I use for the logic down below within the function. So if the click emoji has already been clicked, then it'll essentially reset the game. So to do that, it'll check if the current score is greater than the best score, just to keep track of that best score. If it is, then it'll set a new best score using that set state method for best score. And then for the remainder of this condition, it'll reset this current score, reset the round score, and then give a new set of emojis that are randomly generated for 2 emojis. And opposite of that, if the clicked emoji hasn't been clicked, then it will run this. If the click emoji has not already been clicked, then it will check if the round score is equal to the emoji's length minus 1. So if it was not clicked, so that was like a successful point for the user, if the next point is going to be equal to the length, that's essentially what this is kind of saying here, then we're going to reset the round score to 0, reset the emojis to have one more random emoji than is currently in the emojis array. That's what we do here. So we're increasing the difficulty by adding an emoji to the level, and then it will kind of set the game over. So let's set the next round essentially by keeping the current score and actually incrementing the current score by 1. So I'll show you guys what that looks like. So I click the cookie, I click the metal, then it goes on to the next round and adds another emoji, and now there's 3 random emojis that I gotta click. If I click this one, and then it reshuffles randomly. I click the book, it reshuffles randomly. I click this one. I successfully made it through that round, so then it adds another emoji to the emoji array. Now if I click through this, and oops, I clicked one that I already clicked, the current score goes back to 0, the game starts over, and then the best score is seen from that last round. If we go back to our logic over here for if you click an emoji that had a click status of false, there's still this else statement if the emoji length minus 1 is not equal to the round score. So for example here, if I click this upside down smiley face, we see that the round score was incremented up by 1, and we can't see this, but this clicked emoji's click status was updated to true, and then the emojis were shuffled. Sometimes it doesn't seem like they were shuffled, it's just because it doesn't necessarily guarantee that it's going to be a unique shuffle, especially with these lower level shuffles. When you only have 2, it's a 50-50 chance to get that shuffle. And then it will also increment the current score for that one too. And so that's it. I added the round score just to give it a little bit more complexity and to make it a little bit more interesting, so that users could continue playing for a really long period of time, as many emojis that are in the emoji API that I used. I thought that would be a little bit more interesting than getting just like a limited set of things, and it would make it increasingly more challenging. So that's why I did that. But I mean I like this app in that it works kind of how I expected. It was a little bit more simple than I thought. There's definitely things I can do to make it more fancy, to make it have more loading screens and that kind of stuff from some of the other kind of submissions that I've seen from people that have done the Odin project. But I don't want to spend too much time on this because it did take me, it took me an afternoon to make this app. So I'm interested in getting through the curriculum and getting to doing some of the things that I want to do. So yeah, I think I might do a little bit more of this with this tomorrow, but we'll see what happens. So that's all I got for today, guys. If you liked this video, hit that like button. Let me know if you have any questions or comments about what you saw today, or if you want to let me know about how you're doing on your own journey into web dev and your journey through the Odin project. Definitely feel free to reach out in the comments below. See you tomorrow, guys.